They gave the title to the Pekingese, and the Pekingese's name is Wasabi. I feel like there were a couple of other dogs that were a little bit robbed. What about Bourbon, the Whippet? What about Matthew, the Frenchie? This is going to be sports scandal for days to come.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined by Oliver Camacho, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week, it's the end of an era as we know it. The OC, Oliver Camacho, to you, goes inside the huddle with Magda Krance, Lyric Opera of Chicago's veteran director of media relations, who retired her jersey last week after 30 years of promoting vocal fireworks and putting out fires. Plus, 2-minute drill. Would you want to be quarantined in a hotel with the singers of the world? On this last ep before Father's Day, we'll let you insert the dad joke here. Who will walk out of that quarantine as the BBC's Big Papa? Who's your Big Papa, Oliver, at Roland Garros?
Stefanos Tsitsipas. He came so close, and then he got a groin injury. I don't know what happened, but after he beat Novak Djokovic soundly in the first 2 sets of the final, he started to have some problems with his mobility, and he's all about chasing down them balls, just like me. And so Novak Djokovic, as expected, did in fact win in 5 sets, and it was a heartbreaker. And the speech at the end, when Novak was saying, you did a good job, you could just see in his face, I want to get off of this platform. I need to go have a cry, but I'm a Greek man, and Greek men don't cry in front of TV cameras, so I gotta get out of here. Stefanos, I love you. My Achilles.
Weston Williams just learned so much in those last 90 seconds.
I'm still reeling from the question, Oliver Camacho, who's your Big Papa? I don't think I'll ever get over that, George. I'll never sleep again.
You can blame me for the joke, sorry.
Ashlee Hardgrave here as well tonight.
That is correct. This is usually for sports talk, but we're going to go a little off here. When I was in college marching band. Shout out to all my band geeks.
Hell yeah.
We got PE credit in college for marching band because it was so athletic and it was so aggressive. It even counted as sports classes for our undergrad. We should give all of the sports credits for any degree they ever want to earn to the ensemble of the beautiful new film that is in the Heights. It's some of the most insane choreography, gorgeous dancing, athleticism, prowess. It's stunning. Go see In the Heights.
Of it. The Three Lions of England, my team, are off to a great start in Euro 2020. We beat Croatia on Sunday. Croatia, of course, who ended our 2018 World Cup run. Ooh, revenge tastes good. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So earlier today, I interviewed Magda Krance, the longtime director of media relations, also known as PR, of Lyric Opera of Chicago. Her retirement is imminent, and the Chicago Tribune did a lovely piece on her, which we will link to on our website, operaboxscore.com. I encourage you to read it. She talks about the landscape of arts journalism as it's changing so dramatically in front of our eyes. Within our generation, we're seeing a whole new way of talking about opera and getting opera publicity to the people. We talk about Christine Goerke's debut at Lyric Opera of Chicago. There's also some sports talk, such as how many minutes did Lyric Opera Chicago get to photograph Michael Jordan for a photo shoot? And podcast listeners, we will buffer this introduction with an aria from an opera. She had a big role in publicizing the world premiere of William Bolcom's A View from the Bridge, based on the Arthur Miller play. William Bolcom, friend of the show. You'll hear the aria New York Lights, sung by Gregory Ture. And then right after that, we will hear exactly what did Magda Krance do at Lyric Opera Chicago.
The through stream of my job is to connect people in the media, whether they're music critics or arts journalists or general interest writers or science writers or, radio people or TV people, with what's going on at the Opera House, with the artists, with the administrative staff occasionally, and, with the behind the scenes. And my job has always been to either accommodate the requests that come in or to generate interest by sort of ferreting around at the Opera House, finding interesting people, finding interesting things going on, and then calling or emailing my good friends in the media and saying, would you like to write a story about? And then taking it from there.
So the idea has always been to just bring publicity to what's been happening at Lyric Opera Chicago. And I can imagine, I know we don't have to talk too specifically, but there might have been productions or seasons even that would not have gotten the attention of the media because of their maybe lack of imagination or lack of, star power or whatnot. And so that
then you always find another story. There are always stories behind the scenes at the grand, at the Opera House. And if you can't follow one path, you bushwhack another and find somebody who will be interested to do an interview with an artist who may not be quite as famous yet as some others. But there's always a story. There's always a story to be found and fun to be had. One of the more wacky, fun stories we did was, it turns out Maria Guliegina loved to cook. So it was like, great, let's do a food feature for the Chicago Sun-Times. Let's go to the farmer's market and, or have a reporter and a photographer go with her to the farmer's market, go back to her place, make a pot of borscht and share the recipe. Did it sell tickets? I have no idea, but it put out a different kind of story, as opposed to the internationally famous tenor arrives, gets off the plane, comes to the Opera House and sings, which is that used to be a story. Now not
or
so
internationally
much.
Famous tenor is fired from Lyric Opera.
that was a story. That was before my time, but that was a story.
So let's talk about maybe one of the initiatives or project from Lyric Opera Chicago that did actually generate a lot of natural press. We just heard, if you're listening to the podcast, we just heard an aria from William Bolcom's "A View from the Bridge," which was a world premiere at Lyric Opera Chicago during the artist Kranick years. Correct?
It actually, she commissioned it during her era. We launched the Toward the 21st Century Artistic Initiative, which was to include 2 20th century operas each season, 1 European and 1 American. And in the case of the American operas, we had 3 world premieres, 2 by Bill Bolcom and 1 by Anthony Davis. And Miss Kranick died in 1997, and View from the Bridge had its premiere in 1999. So she did not live to see it, but it was still part of her era.
So what was it like to put the campaign for that particular opera together? What were all the moving parts, and what was some of the results of the campaign?
I was not directly involved with the marketing facets of the campaign, but there was, in that era, Lyric was still doing a lot of direct mail, virtually exclusively direct mail marketing. It was still the era of the very high subscription sales, and if you want to see a show, you better be subscribed or you're not going to
I remember
get
that.
a ticket. Back in the day,
was it 104% sold out? Used to be.
Yep, because we would encourage people who couldn't use their tickets to turn them in to be resold, and they were. And so we beat our own numbers. What did we do? We start, because quite a ways in advance that you're doing a world premiere, you start chumming the waters with different media people, and just putting out feelers and putting out calls. We also, Lyric planned was it that year? I think it was that year. We did symposia where, where we would invite journalists, music critics from around the world to come in to see the world premiere, but also to see, Renee Fleming and Alcina and Bryn Tervel and Falstaff, because, Lyric produces in rep. So we could have like a 4-day span where people could see all that stuff. And that was a lot of fun. But with View from the Bridge, my big victory was to approach. Is that for me?
No. I'm sorry. I was just signaling my roommate to not talk. I just walked in the door.
As you may recall, the New York Times writer Bruce Weber had arrived in Chicago probably in 1998 or early 1999 to be the New York Times first national cultural critic, covering culture anywhere in the country except for New York and LA. And I had known him from my freelancing days. I'd pitched him a couple of stories when he was an editor at the Times, and nothing happened. But as soon as he moved to town, I contacted him and said, "Hi, welcome to town. Maybe you don't remember me, but I remember you, and we want you to, feel right at home at the Opera House." And we got to be friends. He did a few stories, and at some point I started sort of tugging on his sleeve and saying, we're doing this really cool world premiere, and it would be really great if you'd do something about it. And he was basically, "Nah, I'm sick of Arthur Miller," because he had just done a bunch of things with the Goodman Theater around one of their productions of Death of a Salesman. And I kept sort of wheedling and needling and trying to find a different angle in. And then Bruce eventually dawned on him that the New York Times was very big on institutional profiles at that point about cultural institutions and getting behind the scenes stories. And he was like, "Yeah, okay. As long as I don't have to write only about Arthur Miller, I'm in." And from that point, we just took off, and he interviewed the primary sponsor of the production. That was back in the day when we had like one, maybe two sponsors for a production, not a dozen.
Yeah.
And he interviewed Frank Galati, who was directing it. And he interviewed Dennis Russell Davies, who was conducting it. And he interviewed the artists, and he sat in on rehearsals. And he said, I'm not an opera guy. I'm a theater guy. I'm going to ask lots of dumb questions. I'm a theater guy and a sports guy. And he did a brilliant piece of explanatory journalism. And it was a 9-part series in the New York Times, 9 parts. And this was the same season that the Met was doing the world premiere of Great Gatsby. They got one piece in the magazine. That's all. The management at the Met was a little not happy that the hometown paper was giving a 9-part series, which included the opening night and the closing night of the show.
Well, I want to put a pin in the idea of print media, but let's jump ahead like 15 years ish to the world premiere of Jimmy Lopez's Bel Canto, which starred Danielle Denise, and also had a young Anthony Roth Costanzo and an unheard of Janae Bridges, who is now taking over the world.
Yep.
What was that campaign like? How is that different to View from the Bridge? Considering the media landscape, especially, but also the opera house and the audiences and what it takes to actually, get people to come to the opera.
Boy, well, it was 2015. We're fully in the digital world. We're fully in the internet. We're fully invested in the new millennium. 1999, not so much. I don't think our photographers were doing digital photography yet because the management at that time liked to look at black and white prints and color slides. So that was different. We got pretty decent national, international turnout for Bel Canto, partly because of the topicality, partly because of Ann Patchett being the author of the original story, partly because of the Renee Fleming connection, and she, of course, had championed this project and championed Jimmy. I'm sorry. The campaign basically involved doing the same things, which is how many interviews can we arrange for the varying artists? How, are we able to invite media observers into rehearsals to get a sense of what's in store without giving it away. And we also had the complication, but also the benefit that it was being filmed for
PBS.
For PBS Great Performances. So that meant having to juggle photo schedules and rehearsals around the needs of this massive TV presence, which was very exciting, but also very complicating. It just you just have to think in ways that you're not used to thinking.
Well, in this wonderful article that Chicago Tribune published over the weekend, as sort of your exit interview, since you have announced your retirement, which is imminent.
Yes.
Imminent. Chris Jones describes you as an unflappable problem solver. Do you have any anecdotes for us about what it means to problem solve, like Kerry Washington and the scandal or something like that?
If only. There are so many challenges or situations that have to be solved in the course of any day or week or month at the Opera House. It's kind of, and some of them are small. A reporter shows up and he doesn't have a pen. You give him your pen. And not a reporter, but a critic. Or you discover that one of the critics has been issued a ticket in a seat that's already occupied by somebody else, and that person is not about to move, and the critic is not happy, and things like that have to be handled.
Yes. Gracefully.
With as much grace as can be mustered. It helps to know all the ushers. And for many years, I knew them all very well and could virtually always find an accommodation. Or a critic arrives after the curtain has gone up, after the doors have closed, and you get a bit of, don't you know who I am? And it's like, yes, and you're late. Nevertheless, that person needs to be seated. So it's a matter of finding, the house manager or an usher who can say, oh, in box 22, there's a couple of seats in the back. You can slip in there. Problem solved, more or less.
For those of you who are not familiar with Lyric Opera Chicago, they are very strict with curtain times.
We have been. We're getting a little more friendly and flexible, but the basic attitude is, you've paid a certain amount of money for the experience of being in the theater. You've gotten there on time. You don't want somebody crossing across your lap and interfering with your experience because they couldn't get there on time.
Right. And also with some shows, it might even be brushing up against like union rules for the orchestra. And if like you start late, that's what's going to make this show go into overtime. Yeah. And you just cost the opera house like $1 million.
We do not hold it once in a while. If there's like an unexpected, all the bridges are open, and people really physically cannot get to the opera house. The curtain may be held for 5 minutes. Stuff happens. We have often had Sunday matinees scheduled on Chicago Marathon days. That's been fun. Fortunately, in the era of telecommunications and emails and everything else, we get notices from the city. We can send advisories to patrons very efficiently, ahead of the anticipated problem, and say, plan your trip accordingly, plan your travel in such a way that you won't get here 20 minutes late and be mad at us.
Right. We warned you. So
we try.
We did touch upon this topic of, print media and newspapers, and Chicago, for a long time has had arts critics at both the Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune. And we know that all of these newspapers are being bought by giant corporations, and, their budgets are slashed, and they're downsizing. And we're losing, just right before our eyes, we're losing this coverage from, major institutions and from respected journalists. And now we see, what's coming in its place, what's filling the vacuum are like the bloggers and frankly, the podcasts and, and social media, and everybody is a critic.
And some of those everybody's are wonderful, and some, could use a little polishing. First off, I do want to say, do not abandon all hope quite yet. Although the Sun-Times no longer has a full-time on-staff critic, they do have a dedicated arts editor in Miriam D'Annunzio, and she does assign a dedicated freelance writer, Kyle McMillan, who has a solid long background in classical music writing. I think he was a critic at the Denver Post for a while, and he's been in Chicago for a long time. He writes for several publications, and he gives coverage. He reviews. He does occasional features as their limited column inches will allow, but they do, attention is being paid, for which we are grateful. And at the Chicago Tribune, of course, Howard Reich has taken a buyout and has left the building. Chris Jones will be reviewing, in addition to the theaters that he chooses to review as they reopen. He will be reviewing Lyric Productions, is my understanding, and other major cultural offerings. And there is a very very talented freelancer who is also on tap at the Chicago Tribune, Hannah Edgar, and they are already doing a fair bit of classical cultural writing and reviewing.
But the writing is on the wall. I mean, yes,
I'm trying to keep hope alive. Come on, Oliver, work with me.
But I mean,
it ain't the way it used to be.
And can you characterize why that might be a problem for getting information to the public?
I mean, it's every cultural organization. I mean, theaters. The challenge for theaters is there are so many theaters in town that you can't possibly review everything they're doing. Opera companies, we've actually got quite a few opera companies in town, which is thrilling and delightful. But elbowing in between the TV reviews and the movie reviews and the sports and whatever else is still covered in the major papers it's challenging, and finding ways to make what we do to reveal to those who don't know what we do that actually it's engaging, it's interesting. And if you've never gone to see an opera, it's a new experience. even if it's an old piece of music. So we work it.
So there is that thing about, getting neophytes into the opera house, but there's also, because now there's so many ways to get your message out there, the internet is able to find those very specific audiences who don't need to be told that they should come to the opera, that want that information that's a little bit more curated for them, that might give them details about what Anna Trebko is wearing, which I could care less, but is it the job of an opera company like Lyric Opera Chicago to find all of those venues and to have people who can create content for all of those paths that people come to opera?
Oh, good God. I will say that we have a social media manager who was literally born on the day I started at Lyric. She is brilliant and fabulous. She is an old enough soul to get opera, but she also 100% gets contemporary culture and contemporary media and social media and all of those things. And she does a terrific job of both bringing in strands, social media, pop culture strands, and also putting out content that says, hey, look at this way in which we connect to the other things you're interested in. Come check us out. And not overtly. Some of it's just fun and playful and engaging, but and actually during the pandemic, we have been generating terrific amounts of content, even more than during a regular season, because there was no regular season to attend. And our team has done a great job of getting the word out about, it's not what you think it is, and it's worth checking out, and getting into conversations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of opera companies have had to figure out how to have more of an online presence, and it's not our forte, It's not our medium.
San Francisco was on it right at the start, and Lyric was late to the game, but once we got into the game, we got in hard. And the realization came actually several years ago that, because already, 10, 15, even 20 years ago, it's like, okay, the media landscape's changing, and there's this internet, and there's cable TV, and there's all these other things vying for people's attention and time. How do we publicize ourselves? And the realization came to Lyric and to a lot of other companies. You basically have to create your own content, whether it's through blogging or through email newsletters or whatever. You have to profile your own artists, because, the Tribune doesn't have the bandwidth to do that anymore. Yep. The Sun-Times doesn't have the bandwidth. I mean, back in the last millennium, I used to be able to play so many fabulous, fun profiles of, mostly principal artists, but sometimes behind the scenes people, showing them in preparation for a new role or whatever. Big features in the tempo section, which no longer exists. And it was awesome. And all of that's gone away. So we got to do it ourselves.
Yep. Generating your own content and
So we do our, we've been doing.
But you can also amplify the content that the artists create themselves.
Of course. And we do a lot of amplifying. And because so many artists are, just huge on social media and are very smart about doing their own social media, we funnel that into our audience. We find ways to spin it or reshape it or whatever. And it's very symbiotic. And in some ways, it might be easier than the old media model, because the dialogue is between the opera company and the artist, and we're here for you. And there's no hidden agenda or gotcha moments or, okay, I've got ideas about what opera is, and I'm just going to, color by numbers and, like that. I'm sorry, I just went off on a complete tangent.
No,
but...
I was there with you.
Okay.
So Chicago is a big sports city.
Oh yeah.
And I remember there used to be this thing called Operathon.
Oh gosh, yes.
Where it was like a 24 hours or something. It felt like 24 hours, phonathon broadcast on the classical radio station. And you would have celebrities drop in. I remember there was one year where I think Michael Jordan was a big part of that. Was it Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan, what?
At least he was on the cover of the brochure.
Yeah, he was on the cover of the brochure.
Like Elizabeth Buttrell or something.
Yeah, no, there was, no, in that case, it was Michael Jordan and Artis Kranick. Okay. And oh my God, that was a story. He had just come off the court, from a practice, and apparently, Lyric's photographer had set up, a makeshift set that he could just walk on and be with Artis Kranick. And he's, sweating, and there's like, here, put on the sweatshirt. And what's his name? Jackson, Phil Jackson's dog. Apparently, they had set up their studio in the kitchen. The dog runs through the studio, knocks over lights. The photographer sees his life going before his eyes. It's like, oh God, my light is going to hit Michael Jordan, and I'm going to kill him. And didn't happen. But Jordan gave him 3 minutes to do the picture because he had a golf date with his dad. Oh, and the picture is brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. No, the conceit back then was find a really famous Chicagoan to pose for the Operathon cover. So one year it was, Ann Landers. One year it was Daley and Jim, Mayor Daley II and Jim Thompson. It was stuff like that. They didn't show up in the studio. They just showed up to essentially lend cred to what we were doing.
Well, in more recent years, everybody knows about Pau Gasol.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And thank you for remembering the name, because I couldn't remember.
Did you have anything to do with getting the word out that Pau is a fan of opera? And if so, does he get tickets in exchange? And where do you put him? He's like 7 feet tall.
You put him at the break at row AA.
Okay, yes.
That's the only place you can put him. I think he might have sat in boxes occasionally. He was my former boss's special project, so I didn't get to handle him very much. She took care of, getting him his tickets and making whatever media hay she could. But yeah, we actually, and then we had a couple other Chicago Bulls who were big fans, and were always happy to accommodate them. And then they got traded to other teams, and that was the end of it.
Well,
I do have another fun story.
Oh, good.
Sports story for you. And I'm sorry about the light on my shoulders, but what's
totally fine.
It's the sunset. Back in 2005, when we revived our first our ring cycle, the August Everding ring cycle, the presentation of the cycles overlapped with the Cubs opening day. And so we got our pal Bruce Weber, who's a big sports guy and a big baseball fan, to do a piece for the paper on what makes Cubs fans like ringheads. And and he went to the game with a retired AP writer from Hawaii who was a big opera fan. And the two of them had a blast talking opera, talking baseball, and then writing about it.
Nice. So, Magda, as we say goodbye, I know
it's so fast. What happened?
I know. Is there a recent production or a historical production at Lyric Opera Chicago that you just loved so much, and you were so glad you were able to hear it? And maybe we can find some music to play us out. I know you were a fan of Electra, and I was crazy about the Christine Gerke.
Oh my God, the Christine. I mean, I love the music. I love the just relentless drive of the music and the storytelling. It's just, and I remember my first season at Lyric, Elektra was the second opera we did in a completely different production with Eva Martin and Marilyn Chow. And that made a huge impression. But Christine Goerke singing, making her debut at Lyric as Elektra on this incredible ruin of a set, representing the ruined palace and, just the decay and toxicity of that environment. It was so powerful, and every performer in the production was terrific. But I mean, Christine was truly electrifying, and I know it's a crappy pun, but it was just, I mean, it was amazing. And on opening night, and I think practically every other performance, but especially on opening night, you get to the end, the deed is done. She is, dancing in this complete ecstasy and smearing blood on herself and collapses, and the curtain slams down. The audience sat in complete silence for a good 30 seconds. Nothing. Absolutely not a sound. And then they started screaming like they were at a rock concert. It was so freaking cool. And that was one of those, yeah, this is, when we get it right, man, do we get it right. And it was absolutely thrilling. And she was just, was just like, really? You like me? It was amazing. And it was a genuinely unforgettable moment. And of course, I forgot to tell Chris about it. I literally woke up in the middle of the night after that interview and thought, darn, I forgot that. And that was one of my big moments there. But there've been a lot. I mean, there've been a lot of absolutely, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever seen or heard. And I'm just so thrilled and so grateful to be part of this.
That's a lot more minutes than I thought Jordan would have given. How many minutes did you watch the Westminster Dog Show, Ashlee?
So many in all of them. We need to.
How many is that in dog minutes?
7 times. It's 7 times whatever I watched. I'm really devastated that Matt Cummings is not with us today, because I feel like he would have felt this as passionately as I did. They gave the title to the Pekingese, and the Pekingese's name is Wasabi. I feel like there were a couple of other dogs that were a little bit robbed. What about Bourbon, the Whippet? What about Matthew, the Frenchie? This is going to be sports scandal for days to come.
It's true.
Since Matt isn't here, we'll just do our little Olympics watch on his behalf. The IOC has reaffirmed their commitment to moving forward with the Tokyo Olympics. So as of now, they are still happening. By the time you're listening to this, that might have changed. Timestamp June 14th at 8:30 p.m. It's still happening.
Matt Cummings needs that mane trimmed a little bit, I think, that he has. If you've seen the third jersey that the Cubs now have, it is utterly despicable and gross. Photo is going to be on operaboxscore.com. 2-minute drill. That is right now.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
AGMA has ratified a new contract with the Metropolitan Opera. AGMA's executive director, Len Egert, said, quote, considering what the Met was originally publicly seeking in concessions, which was around 30%, this comprehensive agreement is the best resolution for all our members.
Meanwhile, the Met has released its 2020 tax returns, showing that revenue fell by $13 million for the season, while expenses dropped from $313 million to $263 million. Part of that reduction is in salaries, which dropped by $41 million.
I wish my salary was $41 million. One wing of a Cardiff hotel is currently home to the best voices in the world. Per UK's current COVID guidelines, each contestant for BBC's Singer of the World competition coming from red list nations must complete their 10-day quarantine in the same hotel. The hotel has provided each singer with a keyboard, delivers every meal, and has placed all contestants in the same wing so as to not disturb other guests.
No touching! In a world of virus guidelines, masks, and mandatory social distancing, how are the greatest opera houses getting on with the business of, onstage storytelling? The Wall Street Journal covers some of the most creative, dramatic devices currently in use, from feathers for intimacy in Glyndebourne to a Traviata set in a hospital so the chorus could wear PPE. Read all about it if you dare, operaboxscore.com.
That was the perfect opportunity to put on a mask, and there's not one in reach right now. Opera America has announced the 9 recipients of the Opera Grants for Women Stage Directors and Conductors program. The $10,000 prizes to first engagements of those types of artists, directors, or conductors have been awarded to Cincinnati Opera, Glimmerglass Festival, Houston Grand Opera, Michigan Opera Theater, New Camerata Opera, Opera Columbus, Opera Steamboat, West Edge Opera, and friend of the show, Long Beach Opera.
Cuban-born composer Tania Leon has won this year's Pulitzer Prize in Music for her orchestral piece Stride, which draws on American, Caribbean, and West African music. Stride, which was commissioned to celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, pays homage to Susan B. Anthony and Leon's grandmother. Said the composer, quote, "Under all these bells of celebration in my music, there is still a kind of struggle."
And the struggle continues for women who conduct. New York Times article points out that as Marin Alsop's tenure with Baltimore Symphony Orchestra ends, the 25 largest orchestras in the U.S. will go back to having all male music directors.
Yeah! Boo, actually.
That's a boo! Quote, "The Old Boys Network, that's been there for centuries," said Alsop. "We have to create the Old Girls Network, so that we can really be there for each other and support each other." Ashlee Hardgrave volunteers as tribute to make cocktails for the meeting of the Old Girls Network.
The Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama has named Sue Zhong as its first ever international chair in opera, representing Asia. Zhong will work to create opportunities for students from the West to connect with China and the rest of the world via masterclasses, performances, and other musical activities.
Exit stage right, Opera Box Score's Yellow Card, Red Card segment. The spot began as a way to highlight opera houses that were either flirting with COVID regulations in order to produce in-person work, or canceling live performances due to COVID infections. As more and more opera houses continue to invite audiences back inside their walls, the segment died last week. It was 4 months old.
Spanish tenor Francisco Ortiz Calorano has died at the age of 82. Known primarily for his roles in zarzuelas such as Luisa Fernanda, Los Gavilanes, La del Soto de Parral, and La Leyenda del Beso, Ortiz also performed on traditional operatic stages since 1968.
Great Spanish Weston. And on this day, June 14th, 2 operas by Court of Leopold I composer Antonio Draghi premiered. La Gara de Genni in 1671 and Leocipe Festia in 1678, both in Vienna, probably in the Habsburg court. In 1732 was the first performance of Karl Heinrich Graun's Lo Specchio della Fedeltà. In 1769, French composer Pierre-Antoine Dominique de la Maria was born. In 1820, it was the premiere of Schubert's opera, Franz Schubert's Der Zwillingsbruder. It was a Singspiel, actually. In 1877, French mezzo-soprano Jane Bartori, also known as Jean-Marie Berthier, was born. In 1884, Irish-American tenor John McCormick was born. In 1894, English tenor Hedy Nash was born. In 1910, Rudolf Kempe, the German conductor, was born. In 1928, it was the first performance of an opera loved by Weston Williams, The Fiery Angel by Prokofiev. First staged performance of that was in Venice in 1955, but that's not related to today, so I don't know why I mentioned that. In 1949, it was the first performance of The Little Sweep, or Let's Make an Opera, an entertainment for young people, by Benjamin Britten, who was gay, by the way. It's Pride Month. In 1952, the first performance of Kurt Weill's The Three-Penny Opera in the U.S., conducted by Leonard Bernstein.
And that is your 2-minute drill.
And everybody who is listening today to the podcast or watching on Dallas Opera Network, apologies for how fast we seem to be talking today. And for me doing a costume change between the interview, it's very hot in my apartment because I had to turn the AC off for the sound. And I left my computer charger at work. So I'm down to about 14 minutes of computer time.
Oh, Jesus.
So you know the episode is ending soon.
You should leave the charger at work more often because, boy, does it keep this show tight. Yellow card, red card. We hardly knew you.
Rest in peace.
And yeah, there you go. A great segment. So on brand.
Yes, I'm going to say I'm really proud of that because that was one of my good ideas. I have about one every 3 weeks.
She did it.
That was it.
She finally did it.
I did it.
So there are some interesting stats on the ratification of the new contract. Most of the groups, though, so the groups that are broken down, at least on Opera Wire, which is a source for many of our stories, by the way, regular chorus, extra chorus, dancers, staff performers, stage directors, stage managers, and soloists. So in total, they comprise 458 votes. Guess which was the biggest block of no votes to this new contract?
I mean, far away, it was the soloists.
Yes, 113 no's from the soloists. They were the majority of the no votes. There were 124 no votes. And
this is like, all the other categories had like 2 people dissenting, 6 people dissenting, and the soloists were not having it.
Well, that is seems to be a can of worms and a conversation we can have probably for another day. I know that Lizette,
when we're not running out of battery power.
Exactly. There has been some anti-Lizette Oropeza sentiment in the singer network because of her stance. And I don't want to like open that can of beans and not eat those beans. So we'll have to investigate those beans.
No beans today.
Yes,
no beans.
Later on.
Speaking of numbers, though, I do want to bring up
bean counting.
Bean counting, yes, very good. That was the connection I was looking for and couldn't find. So Yannick Nézet-Séguin earned $915,000 last year compared to the $392,000 prior, which is kind of wild considering how few performances, but it kind of makes sense because he was just getting started as music director. The one that really blows my mind, though, is that last year, Peter Gelb made $1.46 million. Oh, but don't worry, it is less than he made the previous year, which was $1.49 million. Like, the optics of that, like if I was the Met, I would pull a Donald Trump and just hide my tax information because that is such a bad look given what's been going on.
They don't need a salary.
It's a perfectly good understanding for why they cut all of those chorus and extras and technical workers' health insurance. Makes perfect sense now. It's like, okay,
God.
Got it.
I mean, that household could live on the Carrie Lynn Wilson salary alone. All those gigs that she's got.
That's irrelevant, though. Like, look, and I cannot believe I'm defending Peter Gelb on this show. let me just say here, if you're an NFL head coach, the lowest paid NFL head coach, Kyle Shanahan of the San Francisco 49ers, gets $3 million a year for what is essentially 16 performances if you discount the playoffs. 16 performances, right?
Good point.
How many performances are under Peter Gelb's eye?
Last year, not very many, George.
Yeah, about 2.
Okay, I get that. But in a very strange year, I honestly, this salary to me, it seems fair.
We're going to need to get beer companies to sponsor operas if we're going to start playing with the NFL.
I would just, all I'm saying is first thing you do if you're not paying your musicians for almost a full year is you take a pay cut. That's what you do.
Right, and he did, to the tune of $0.03 million.
So, Weston,
my salary.
Do you have something to say about Tanya Leon before we wrap it up as my computer's like...
I I have something to say. Yay, Tanya! Yay, very well-deserved Pulitzer. It's such a timely, beautiful win for her. Tom Wizinga has a really great interview with her from last week. Yeah, it is a gorgeous piece. But yeah, on NPR.org, Tom Wizinga has a great interview with Tanya. I encourage you to check it out. Also, in the realm of Pulitzers, hooray for the Pulitzers for also giving a special citation to Darnella Frazier. If you remember, Darnella Frazier is the person who filmed the incident with George Floyd and is the whole reason that we know that anything happened. So the Pulitzers really got a lot of stuff right this year. Well done.
All right, let's wrap it up. Just like Oliver says.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Good call. Bad call. Oliver Camacho.
So I was working on Sunday as the men's final at Roland Garros was taking place. So I put it on my DVR, and NBC has decided to farm out the French Open finals, which usually air on the main network, to Peacock, their new streaming service. So I recorded it on Peacock, and the Peacock recording app, whatever it is, only recorded 3 hours. So here I am watching two amazing sets of tennis, seeing Stefanos Tsitsipas wipe the floor with Novak Djokovic and thinking, okay, well, this ends in 3 hours, so he obviously is going to win. So I basically decided I don't need to even watch this anymore. And I'm fast forwarding through the third set, and it gets to the end of the third set, and Novak Djokovic is winning that set. It's like, what the F is going on? So I had to go to Tennis Channel and record their rebroadcast of the men's final and wade through the first 2.5 sets of it to get to the action I wanted to see and see the conclusion of the match at like midnight on Sunday. And by that point, everybody knew who had won, and I had resisted looking at social media. I'd resisted looking at any kind of news so I could not know the results by accident. And what a colossal F up. Peacock, thank you so much. You suck at live sports.
Hey, almost as bad as ESPN Plus, which I actually paid for so I could watch like more multicam looks at the Euro 2020. And it's like one big shot of the field and then two close-ups of the number 10s who rarely have the ball. I don't get it. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer, it's Norm Woodel, normwoodel.com. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. Help us deepen that bench of listeners by liking and sharing our social media posts on Twitter and Instagram. We're at Opera Box Score. Email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher or just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score is, well, it's fine if your dad says it's okay. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. Thank you to our guest, the unflappable Magda Krance. For your co-host, Ashlee Hardgrave, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera with the father figure in your life. We're back with an all-new show next week. You're going to get more headlines, more hot takes, and more dad bods. Yeah. Join us.